Down Low Investigations is a sponsor of You're Free to Go. Behind every great criminal defense attorney is a great private investigator. That's why Mark and I use Down Low to investigate cases all over the country. Down Low can help you too, whether you're running a background check on an employee or running a background check on a blind date, or let's say you need someone followed or some other type of investigative work conducted. Down Low is the way to go. Call Download Investigations at 561-843-1806. You're Free to Go is sponsored by Lang Realty, South Florida's premier residential real estate broker. Whether you're buying, selling, or renting a home or condo, Lang's experienced realtors are standing by ready to help you. Contact one of Lang's top realtors today at 561-703-2427. You're Free to Go is sponsored by Milburn Men's Clothing, where top athletes shop for sharp, tailored style. And whether Mark and I are in the studio or the courtroom, Milburn dresses us for success. Mention YFTG and get 10% off at Milburn Men's Clothing, which has been providing the finest in men's clothing and suits since 1946. Call 651-645-2922 or visit www.milburn.com. Welcome back, everybody, to You're Free to Go. Mark and I are here today, and as you know, we always talk about our crazy-ass cases. We also talk about the behind the scenes, the things that really go on in these criminal cases in the criminal justice system with jurors, with judges, with witnesses, all that good stuff. So the truth is, when you talk about true crime and the true crime genre, we are the epitome of the true crime genre because we're the guys in the trenches actually handling these cases day in and day out. Now today, we're taking You're Free to Go to a whole nother level. It's our first episode with a guest. We're really excited to have this guest on today. And don't worry, we'll continue to have lots of episodes where it's just me and Mark talking about our crazy-ass cases. But we're also going to have guests in the future. We're even going to have episodes where we talk about movies that have criminal subject matters to them and analyze those movies. We'll talk about high-profile
movie critics now.
On occasion, I think people want to hear that. Like my cousin Vinny, I think people want to talk about that one day.
One day the end of my career, I'm going to stand up in front of the jury. And I know it's my last case. And in my opening statement, I'm going to say everything you just said is bullshit and sit down. Be held in contempt, but it'll be worth it.
And then you will retire.
Then I'll retire.
It may be a forced retirement by the
right,
judge.
Exactly.
But yeah, we'll even talk about high-profile cases. We've avoided that up to this point. We've always talked about our cases, and that is the real purpose of this podcast, is to talk about our cases. We're real lawyers talking about our real cases. But we'll talk about some high-profile cases. Future episodes will address the P. Diddy case, for example, and the Idaho murder cases.
Right.
But we'll always go back to what we're about, which is our cases. Now, before we get into our first guest today, Mark, I know you have a couple of thoughts about today's episode with a guest.
I know that a couple of people have called in and have asked about a very interesting topic, which is you've represented some high-profile people, some people who have been vilified, some people who have been, attacked in the media. And what's been the effect on them? And we've talked about a little about the effect on people's lives that we've represented. Even if they're acquitted, it's never getting back to where they were to begin with. But what's interesting is it doesn't have to be a high-profile case. It doesn't have to be a monumental case. Actually, anytime someone is accused of a crime, no matter how minor, no matter how minuscule the incident is, it can have a devastating impact. And that's what I understand today's episode is about. You have a very interesting case, not a monumental crime accused of, but nevertheless an important situation to this young man who we're going to have with us today.
You are so right. And what I always say to clients, whether it's the smallest misdemeanor or the biggest felony case, I always say we're treating this as if it's the most important case in the world because of the impact it has on our clients' lives.
And their families sometimes,
right.
too.
and their families. You're 100% right. Yeah, so let me set the table for today's guest. It was around September of 2024. I get a call from Dory and Bill Gerstein. They're known in South Florida by everyone as probably the premier immigration attorneys around. And they call me, it was after hours. They say, Guy, we need your help immediately. Our nephew, he's an honor student at University of Florida, and he's under investigation for some crazy situation, and we need you to jump on this immediately. So they started telling me about their nephew, and I said, I'll be happy to help. And his name is Ben Cohen. He's going to get on in a second. But before we turn it over to Ben, I want to let our audience understand who Ben is, what his character is all about. And I was thinking, how do I set this up for the audience before introducing Ben? And I remembered we had a ton of character reference letters written on his behalf. And one that stood out to me always that I'm going to read was from his high school principal. Now, we know that principals never put themselves on the line for things like this, but Ben...
I wouldn't want a letter from my high school.
Yeah, can't imagine what that would say, right? I don't think my high school principal knew who I was. But Ben's high school principal wrote that in 36 years as an educator, Ben is one of the most considerate students with whom I have had the pleasure of working with. The principal goes on to say, I have encountered and worked with all kinds of students from all kinds of cultural and socioeconomic backgrounds. Ben is one of those kids I will always remember because of his compassion, his respect, his kindness, and most of all, his ownership of responsibility, which I think is key, those last couple of words, because in this case, as we hear his story, we're going to hear that he did own up to the responsibility in this situation. And so...
Well, we're anxious to hear about it. So set the table. What's the incident that occurred?
Well, I think I'm going to let Ben tell. So, Ben, I'm going to turn it over to you, and the floor is yours now. So welcome.
Ben.
Welcome.
Thank you guys very much. It's an absolute honor to be here. Working with you guys, incredible, and something that is memorable. So my story, what is it? It's obviously I've had a lot of time to think about it the day it happened, but what exactly happened is I was walking back to my dorm room one night at UF, correct? I got in, front door student, 4.0 GPA. It's not easy to get into UF. And I'm walking back to my dorm, and pretty typical night, and I see a group of people down the hall, and I'm walking, ready to go study, and this little ball rolls out to me as I'm on the way to my dorm, in that transit. And I thought I was funny, started kicking the ball around, people were laughing. And then for some reason, not necessarily a great decision, I decided to step on the ball, not necessarily break or destroy a ball, but I thought it would be funny, thought it would be amusing in that college dorm. And
at this point, you're 18 years old, right? And you're a freshman. Is this your first time really living away from your home and you're being on your own?
Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
That was the first experience that I had, and it was early on in fall as well.
Okay.
And I step on the ball, I keep walking, and I hear people scream, and I see people run out that door, or run out the back door, and I turn around, and I saw what I now know to be a dwarf hamster that was on the floor and presumably dead. And I had realized what I had done.
Wait, the hamster was inside the ball?
The dwarf hamster was inside of the ball.
Did anybody tell you there had been a hamster in the ball?
I had no idea. Zero clue that the hamster was in the ball. And of course, I would have never done that if there was an indication of the dwarf hamster being in the ball.
That's key, Mark. It was a dwarf. When I worked on this case, I'd never heard of a dwarf. We researched it, and Ben told me we looked it up.
How big could that be?
Literally 0.6, 0.7 ounces. That's how small it is.
So it was rolling down the hall. Everybody was laughing. While you kicked it, everybody was laughing. Nobody said, hey, there's a hamster in the ball?
Nothing that I heard.
Oh, my God.
Well, and when he says he heard, it's important that you know that it was about 45 feet away where these other kids were. We measured it, obviously, in defense of the case. We said, well, he's telling me, Guy, I didn't hear anything. I swear I didn't hear anything. He's been consistent from day one about this version. It's exactly what happened. So we measured it, and it was 45 feet down a hallway. So there's, it's very believable. He did not hear.
So what happened then?
Right. So I step on the hamster by accident, unknowingly. And I realized that what I had done, and my immediate instinct was, I need to apologize to these girls. The sole owner of the hamster I haven't seen, But the friends, the friend group, I tried contacting some of them and saying, I'm so sorry. If there's anything I can do, please let me know. I offered to buy a new hamster.
I assume the hamster was dead.
Yes, it was.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
it was buried that night. I heard about that as well.
Okay.
And I went into my room. I was in complete shock, of course, and pain, and I just felt awful that this terrible accident had just occurred. I have 5 dogs at home. I love my dogs. I'm an animal lover, and to be involved in something like this was no short of awful and a complete tragedy. Even though it was only 0.6 ounces, it's still a living thing.
So
Right.
how did this turn into a criminal case?
Right. So when we talk about the criminal case, I met a great criminal defense attorney. You guys know him as Guy, and we
Thank you.
contacted him.
Well, had the police contacted you?
Oh, right. Well, I guess I have to
Tell us the story.
break
What
it
happened
down.
next?
So immediately after the event, I'm in my dorm room and my phone starts, people start texting me. People are hearing about this already.
It
People
literally goes viral, huh?
it went viral on all over the internet, and we'll get into that as well. When you to quickly go on that point, when you mentioned people's families and how someone who is accused of a crime, you say you treat it like a serious case because of the impact it has on not just them but their families. And we're going to talk about, I want to discuss cyberbullying and how that's now a lifelong campaign of mine on how to prevent that and what comes along with that. But to continue on with the story, after I accidentally stepped on the dwarf hamster, people started hearing about this. It got on Reddit. My name was immediately put out, the entire story, and I was made to be that this was intentional. And I had people knocking on my door, yelling Jeffrey Dahmer and
Was
calling
this
me
the same
that.
night?
The same night, yes, people were knocking on my door.
It immediately started happening?
It immediately spread like wildfire because when the people went downstairs, they were talking, I guess, about it and heard about it. I was getting text messages. And it was at that moment that I knew that it was serious. The criminal side was a couple days later. And I haven't even contacted my parents up until probably 2 days after because I didn't know how serious it was going to be. But the part where the police do get involved is I was at a friend's apartment living my normal life, and I get a call. And my friend says, Ben, there's police here asking about a hamster. And I, being the 18-year-old, in my eyes, innocent, young, responsible, hopefully, respectful, as Guy said, someone who I wanted to own up to this. Immediately after, even on Snapchat, I was telling people, yeah, it was an accident. I didn't know the hamster was on the floor. And when I heard about the police, I had my friend drive me over back to the dorm, and I showed up to the front desk and said, hi, my name is Ben Cohen, and I'm here to discuss a hamster. And watching back that footage, actually, I remember the police in the back were saying, pretty bold move from this kid.
Right.
And that was when we got the footage back.
Was this campus police or Gainesville police?
It was UFPD.
Okay.
It was UFPD. But that's the real police. It's just UFPD,
Right.
I believe
Okay.
is what it's called.
Yeah. Did you have a question?
No, go ahead.
Okay. No, what's interesting to me is that you had told me that when you had just gone through orientation not that long before this incident, and they told you that pets are not allowed in the dorm. And they also even, I think, talked about therapy pets and so forth. And you had no reason to think there would ever be a pet in the dorm. And as far as you knew, no one had a therapy pet in the dorm as well. So there's a lot of reasons to, have confidence in your representation that you had no idea there was a pet there.
So you told the police your story,
Yes, I told the police my story.
and then what happened?
And then I went on with life. I told my mom about it, and then she told the rest of the family. I was still in that position, 18, college. I wasn't at that maturity standpoint that I am now after everything I've learned from this experience. And of course, we'll talk about that as well. But
Before charges, there was an article in the newspaper, right?
right, before charges,
What
there
did
was
the article say?
the article said, and they actually, looking back on it now, it wasn't as bad as initially. Of course, the emotion in the moment was something that I'll always remember. But they said Ben Cohen, vicious, or stepped on a hamster and killed it. And I don't know if they used the word intentionally, but everyone on Reddit and social media immediately assumed that it was intentional. And if we kind of get into that aspect, which was immediately after, I actually had to come home from the University of Florida because I didn't feel safe on campus anymore.
You were
So
getting
in it-
death threats, right?
I was getting threats specifically. Maybe we can even show them. I mean, they're out there. People were threatening to curb stomp me. People were something about my address. People were mentioning my parents. And the part about it is not only was I living this, but my parents, my family, my grandparents.
Yeah, your
were seeing
parents
what
were
was going
very,
on.
very nervous. I didn't talk to your grandparents, but I talked to your parents and your aunt and uncle who had originally called me. They were very scared for your safety, and it was a family discussion and meeting to decide that you should go home. And I think it's a great idea that we'll ask our engineer Ben. Maybe he can edit into the video content of this podcast some of those posts, so our viewers can see that.
So let me understand. You're seeing a ball roll down. You think it's some kind of ball or some kind of game. You're kicking it. At some point, you step on it. No idea there's anything in it. Certainly, it's such a small ball. How would you think there's anything in it? A live, animal. And then as a result, sadly, you kill the animal dies. And from that, you get death threats?
Yes, and
I mean, it just seems amazing.
And to this day, I receive cyberbullying because of my social media campaign or program that I have going on right now. To this day, I still receive comments daily from people mentioning the hamster, people making up jokes, saying you should, like I'm writing a letter right now to a famous person, and they should say you should write an apology for that hamster that you killed, you vicious killer.
Right. Well, there's all these animal rights activists, which of course we support. I know you support too. But what they didn't know about you, when you just said, I love animals, you have dogs and so forth. But it's not just words. You have actions behind it. I know approximately 2 months before this incident, you found and rescued a dog on the streets of Gainesville in the middle of the night. Why don't you tell Mark and our viewers about that?
Right. It actually wasn't in Gainesville. It was in my hometown of Boca Raton.
Okay.
And I was at a friend's house till like 12 or 1, and I was walking home. I lived in the neighborhood, and there was a dog, a pet, that was in the middle of the street. And we had photos. I forgot about that, actually. And, I contacted the security. I have a good relationship with the security. And I said, there's a dog here. And there was a name caller. I called the number, no answer. And we were sitting out there with this dog for like 2-3 hours in the middle of the night.
Yeah.
And it was instinct. I love animals, and of course I'm going to do that if I see that dog in the street.
Yeah, and I can tell you that went a long way with the prosecutor. We got a copy of that. There was an incident report at the police department. We got that incident report, shared it with the prosecutor, because the angle of the media was that he hates animals, he kills animals, horrible. So we had to show them, no, he's an animal lover. Look what he did, just very recently, in fact.
So you say prosecutor. So the police didn't arrest you when you first went there, right?
Absolutely not.
So how did you wind up getting prosecuted? What happened?
Right. Well, what occurred is that we and Guy and his team, there was a crime that was charged, I guess, as a result of me going to the police and owning up and telling my story.
How long after you going to the police?
I don't know the exact dates on that, when the charges came.
Were you actually physically arrested?
No, I was not.
Yeah. So it was about 2 months afterwards. I had a lot of dialogue back and forth. The prosecutors didn't want to prosecute it, really. They, after talking with them, they understood the whole situation. In fact, the officer who investigated says under oath that he believes that Ben did not know that there was a hamster in there. What happened, and we've talked about this a little bit in episodes in the past, and we'll talk about it probably in every episode, victims have a lot of impact. So the owner of this hamster really went to the prosecutor and pushed very, very, very hard to get this case prosecuted. Huh. And they ultimately filed a charge against Ben for cruelty to animals.
Yeah. Frankly, that's insane.
Yes, it really, really is.
Really insane.
But it shows sometimes the power of an alleged victim in this case. Who I think you alluded to the fact that she had a funeral for it. Was Timmy? Was that the name of? I'm trying to remember. Yeah, the name was Timmy. If I recall, she highly publicized, and in respect, it was her pet, and she was very upset about it. But there was also a point where I think she turned it a little bit into a carnival. If I remember, people had some T-shirts on with Timmy's picture on it, maybe. And
how much did the groundswell of public vilification of you and all the noise that was out there around the campus have an impact on the decision to prosecute?
It had a lot of impact on it. It was in the media, and they knew they couldn't. We know prosecutors, the state attorney gets elected. They have to be reelected. And they think about those things in those communities. So
it wasn't just the individual. When we say victim, the owner of the hamster, it was just everything else, all the noise created an atmosphere.
Yes, put pressure on the
Was there
prosecutor.
anything else published in the newspaper or anywhere else, campus paper or anything about
Yes,
it?
there was a follow-up once we went to court and settled with the probation. They followed up on the case, and all the media stuff and the worst, the school paper was one thing, but the cyberbullying and the harassment, to this day, I received phone calls. I actually received a text one afternoon saying, lock your doors, and I was scared. And I told my stepmom about it. And then 10 minutes later, someone said, the Hamster Brigade is coming.
Oh.
And I have screenshots. But I do want to take a moment, and when you guys talk about the victim, everything that happened in every story, and part of the purpose, the reason why I would want to be on a podcast like this, is the message that no matter what situation, no matter how ridiculous, no matter how small, no matter how minuscule you might think it is, it could have massive impacts on your life. However, no matter what life throws at you, you can overcome. I have no hatred, no remorse, nothing against the victim for doing what she did. I honestly, in a sense, understand it was her pet, and of course it was an accident. However,
Yeah, but how could she not understand it was an accident?
that I wouldn't know. That would be beyond.
That's the thing that
Yeah, and I even communicated with her parents. They lived out of state, which is often common at a state school, which is located in Gainesville. A lot of the students' families are from out of state. Spoke with the family. The father is a lawyer. We were able to have a high-level conversation as lawyers and really explain the big picture here. And I was hopeful that would get them and his daughter to agree that, yeah, let's not ruin Ben's life. Let's maybe have a conversation with him, make sure he understands, that he made a mistake and there should be a consequence, but not necessarily a criminal consequence. And unfortunately, in the end, they wouldn't agree to that, and so the prosecutor continued with.
So
their
there
case.
was a charge filed, and you actually had to defend the case.
Yes. Yeah. So, but we got a good result, which we'll get to in a second. But Ben, talk about what it really did to your life. You said overcome things, but what did you overcome? Like,
Right.
for example, what did the school do to you?
Right. So the school, I had to go through multiple hearing processes with the school as well, up and back from Gainesville to Boca 3 or 4 times. And I had to face that hearing. We had a meeting, then we had to come home. And the school put me on a deferred suspension. However, I was able to stay in online class, and my GPA.
So
is
how
in the
long
top.
after the incident were you suspended?
So the sanctions from the school, I was suspended on deferred suspension with spring and through summer. I'm not on good standing until, and of course this will be released at a certain period in time. I'm back in good standing with UF on August 8th
Of this year.
of this year.
When did this incident occur?
It was September 11th,
Of
24.
2024.
so September of last year, less than a year ago, this happened. And when did the school discipline you?
The ruling was in December. I'm not 100% sure on that,
But-
but they suspended me for 2 semesters.
And they made you move out of the dorm, right?
Right. No, we did that on our own.
That was something you volunteered to
Because
do.
we wanted to comply with the victim and make sure we were doing in hopes that we would avoid those criminal charges.
And what was the reason what was the stated reason for the suspension?
So the suspension, and when I also wanted to talk about, from my perspective now with criminal defense and dealing with schools, colleges as well. The school found me responsible for 5 different, I guess, what they call charges, but it's not guilty or not guilty. It's responsible or not
For
responsible.
what?
It was, and this is where, for where I come in as humbly and maturely as possible, I did find this quite outlandish. I was charged with, we actually pled responsible to a couple of them because, as I said, ownership was a big part of
Right.
this.
And what was it?
I pled responsible to playful jokes in the dorm. I pled responsible. I don't remember.
Playful jokes
It was
in
like
the dorm?
practical pranks, I believe.
Practical
what
pranks.
the phrasing was. There was a cruelty to animals, which we said not responsible
How
for.
is that possible?
Because the not responsible because I didn't do that
Right.
intentionally,
I
of
mean,
course.
go ahead. Cruelty to animals. What's next?
And one of them was harassment, which we absolutely not responsible. I mean, there's just nothing to do
Who
with
came
what
up with
happened.
these? Were these students who made up these charges, or were these actually administration officials of the school?
It was the administrative office of the school
Really?
came up with that this is their protocol. And we faced the panel of 3 staff members.
I guess there's just nothing of any consequence going on at U of F. No crime, no sexual harassment, no robberies, no assaults, nothing. This was the crime of the century
for them. I've also found with schools at all levels, actually, that they have zero tolerance these days. They will sacrifice the rights of one individual, in their opinion, to protect the rights of the student body as a whole.
I understand protecting the rights, but this is, and you'll excuse the expression, chicken shit.
I agree. Hey, by the way, I talked to hundreds of people about this case when we were workshopping the case and to prepare for trial, if we went that route. And 100% of the people we consulted with agrees with you.
Oh, my God. But, it's one thing, the prosecution was horrible enough, but the school taking action against you, they should be ashamed of themselves. That's how I feel. But be as it may.
You're Free to Go is sponsored by Lang Realty, South Florida's premier residential real estate broker. Whether you're buying, selling, or renting a home or condo, Lang's experienced realtors are standing by ready to help you. Contact one of Lang's top realtors today at 561-703-2427.
All right. So what happened to the criminal case?
So, Ben actually pled no contest, which we obviously as lawyers know, but some of our viewers might not realize. It's saying it's not admitting guilt. It's just saying I'm not going to contest these charges. I'm not saying I'm guilty. I'm not saying I'm not guilty. I want to put this behind me, and in my best interest to move forward with this case, I'm going to say no contest and accept the punishment that we had negotiated.
Was there a withheld adjudication?
Yes, so there's a withhold.
Would you explain to our viewers what that means in
Florida?
Yeah,
the judge has the discretion to convict you or not convict you. Conviction is called an adjudication of guilt. If the judge says I'm not going to convict you, it's called a withhold of adjudication. So Ben does not have a conviction on his record. He does not have a guilty plea.
It was a misdemeanor?
It's a misdemeanor.
Right.
And the good news is when this case is all over, he can expunge the record. So that'll be good for him. That will petition to expunge. And then under Florida law, whenever asked under oath, have you ever been charged with a crime, he can legally answer no. There's a couple exceptions, like if you're applying for the Florida bar, applying to work with children and children and family services or law enforcement, you are required to say yes. But it's a very powerful mechanism to be able to expunge a case. And I do know that when I first met with Ben, one of the career paths he was thinking about was law. And as I understand it now, he is actually working in a law firm. So down the road, this consequence its head could come up again because you're going to have to apply to the bar if you pursue that career path and explain this to them. And you'll probably have a hearing and a meeting. I believe they'll recognize that you were 18 years old at the time, and they'll hear all the facts and circumstances, and that it will not, and that it was expunged. I believe it will be expunged so that it won't hurt you in getting into the bar. But it will be something you'll have to address again in the future if you go apply to the Florida bar one day.
So you're going to start school again in August, or maybe I misunderstood. You said that you're still taking online classes.
I was, but I'm actually, and part of the process and what I've been through and what is best for me, I'm going to be transferring to FAU. That's part of my plan.
Ah, okay.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Well, University of Florida is a great school. It's just a shame that they took a misguided approach.
However, I did have the option to return to UF. It was completely in my decision to transfer to FAU.
Right, but you were suspended for a period of time.
Right, on deferred suspension.
Right.
Yeah.
So how else has this affected your life?
Right, in many positive ways, and I know some people might be confused by that, but it truly is the reality of my situation. When I came home from school, cyberbullying, of course, took a toll, and I met with therapists. And the important person.
Well, that's not very positive.
Well, that isn't positive. No. However, the outcome is positive though, because I've improved as a human being. And specifically, I met with a life coach. And I didn't know what a life coach was. I'm not sure if you guys have worked with life coaches in your
we know what it
career.
is, yes.
But meeting with my life coach was game-changing for me, because when I was going through this time where the world just thought I was someone who I wasn't, and my family members had to live through this as well, and the anxiety and the stress, meeting with my life coach was game-changing for me, because he explained what life coaches do. And the reason I kind of know now is because I'm in the midst of a certification course to become a life coach myself,
Right.
which is something I'm very excited about because I know how much it impacted my life. But what life coaches do, which is in contrast to a therapist, they focus on the present and the future, whereas in therapy, they focus more on the past and analyzing and helping in that sense. But I love the mindset of a life coach analyzing a situation and helping the client open their minds and focus on the present and the future, which is what I'm all about now.
I'm sure there are a lot of therapists out there who would kind of disagree with you about not focusing on the present and the future, but I understand what you're saying.
And you never would have gone through that if you hadn't had this arrest, this charge.
Absolutely.
Right.
And if I hadn't had this charge, I wouldn't have come home, and I've reconnected with family on a higher level. I've learned the importance and the value of family. I've learned the importance of being appreciative of what you have and not unappreciative for what you don't have. I've learned the importance of all these life lessons. And of course, I've been working now, so I've gained that experience, which is only beneficial for you to be in that type of setting. So even though this situation, which, you guys as the professionals broke down, and you say how ridiculous you feel as though it is, my mind just hasn't even been there for so long. I've been focused on, and something that I learned through life coaching as well, this is is my redemption story, not my contamination story. And even though those cyberbullying things out there were slandering my name and accusing me of things that I didn't do intentionally, they're out there, and I have to live with
Let me
that.
ask you this, because the internet and social media creates permanency in terms of information. Don't you think as time goes on in the future, when you meet people or you're applying for a job or somebody researches you, which is pretty common these days, in a dating situation, in a job situation, people look someone up on the internet and they'll see this story on the internet. How are you going to deal with that?
Right. And I'm actually glad you brought that up. And this is something I've discussed with Guy. And this is part of the solution. It's putting my side of the story out there once I have that right. I've had to be quiet for a long time when this was happening. Anything I say can and will be used against me. So now, as a free functioning individual, I have the opportunity to explain myself. And additionally, I've taken it to social media as well. And I started my own personal brand that's named Ben Chase Motivation. And I post motivational content. And part of the purpose of that is, yes, how I've changed, but also who I am and who I've always been. I like helping people and other people out there who are going through a tough time or cyberbullying or being slandered. Just if my story can be some sort of message that you can overcome it and you can redeem yourself in any situation, then it would have been worth it for me.
Of course, the problem is, when you are accused of something and it's printed in the media or there's a groundswell of information that is antagonistic to your position, it's hard to make as much noise in explaining your situation. There's an old expression by, I think it was Mark Twain, said, never pick a fight with a man who buys ink by the barrel, meaning newspaper men at that time. Now, newspapers don't matter like they used to, and now it's social media. So, that will always be there, despite the fact that you're on this now and you're talking about it, and you will, I'm sure, be talking about it in other venues as well. But how do you deal with that in the future?
Right. Well, the only answer is to accept, is to forgive, is to just look yourself in the mirror and say, this is part of my story. And I'm a human being still. I'm still free functioning. I still get to go to work, get to go to school, get to live a life.
Well, that's an interesting point because, you were fortunate. Well, fortunate is kind of an overstatement because you shouldn't have been prosecuted or arrested to begin with, or charged, and you certainly shouldn't have been disciplined. But in any event, you didn't go to jail. And just imagine if you had been jailed and served time, do you think your attitude would have been the same?
I think that's an excellent point. And actually, I had to, part of my story, and even though Guy was extremely assuring and he turned out to be very accurate, there was a 3-4 month stretch in the period of time from the charge to when we pled no contest, where I had to go to sleep every night. And there was a part of me that thought I could go to jail for this.
Okay.
If the prosecutor if the judge didn't agree to the deal with the prosecutor. So I did feel that in my core at night, thinking I could be in jail. And listen, everyone told me no, but there was still that part of me. I'm just being honest.
Sure, that's
that
the
the
natural
worst that
reaction.
worst case scenario part of the brain,
Right.
where I could be in jail for a year over this. That was the maximum sentence.
And
Well, Guy did an excellent job
thank
and
you.
got an agreement with the prosecutor.
Yes, he did.
during that time when we were looking at there could be some jail, I was confident there wouldn't be, but there was a serious several months, like you just said, where it was a possibility. And we had my firm, we have a team that works on your case, and there were several people strategizing and recommending or putting out there as an option to file a complaint against the owner of the hamster. Maybe with the school that she wasn't allowed to have a hamster, and she did. Maybe cruelty to animal for her for playing with it in an area where it could get hurt and so forth. You were always very insistent that you did not want to go down that road. So maybe you could share why you were so strong about that.
Absolutely. And it really ties back to cyberbullying, because if you haven't been through it, you wouldn't really understand what it's like to have your name out there in any way, whether it's true or fake or false or whatever that perception is, to have thousands of people commenting. And I have to sit with my father and read through these comments about people wishing death to me, death penalty for the hamster killer. People calling me Jeffrey Dahmer, which of course is, it's insane.
Yeah,
Sorry.
yeah.
But that I did have to live with. So the reason why I would never want to disclose or just not ever disclose the name of someone else is because I know how dangerous the media is.
Right.
And even doing this, there's going to be articles out there that go against this. They'll find a way. However, with the right mindset, I can overcome anything at this point.
Right.
And accepting, like I said, forgiving. But if I was jailed, or the initial question about the whole social media thing, I now want to start a charity soon. I'm working on it, where we're raising money to go against cyberbullying.
Well, the other thing that you brought up a very interesting point, and I've been thinking about this as you tell your story. One of the charges against you in the disciplinary action was, I think you called it playful, what was it?
Pranks or practical jokes.
Okay. Well, if they had done their investigation, forgetting about you complaining, they would have determined that there were these other students there, and the ball was rolling down with an animal in it, which was prohibited. And they were laughing about it. And while you were kicking it, they were laughing about it. So it seems there's a lack of even-handedness in this situation. And I can only assume, and I hate to assume, because it's, when you assume you make an ass out of you and me, but it sounds like just the tide of antagonism against you and labeling you just was so overwhelming that nobody bothered to go after anybody else for those, I called them chicken shit charges that they disciplined you for.
Well, there are a lot of animal rights activists out there who didn't understand or believe that Ben did not know there was a hamster there.
Well, there's using famous sayings. There's another famous saying, and I think this is Churchill, but it goes, and I think it's really fabulous saying, a lie gets halfway around the world before the truth gets its pants on. So what happened here is obviously the rumor started, and before you know it, everybody was willing to believe it, and nobody wanted to listen to the truth, huh?
That's right. Because if it were true that he intentionally stepped on it, all of us in this room and around the world would understand why there was such a momentum and a swell of animosity and anger towards him. But they didn't know the truth.
How big was this ball?
The ball.
Show it by your hand.
We had a model, probably that big.
Very small. Very small.
Yeah.
Like a softball?
It was like a plastic ball.
A plastic ball.
Yeah,
Yeah, I didn't know at the time.
And it was opaque. In other words, you couldn't see inside.
No, it was transparent.
Yeah, but you didn't see anything.
No, because
it was
rolling
down.
and it was light gray and on the white floor. So that's why I wouldn't have seen it ever.
If you were to be in a room, let's say they came in right now, the owner of the hamster and the friends that she was with that night, is there anything you'd want to say to them or ask them Or,
Well, we did try to apologize, multiple
yes,
times.
that's right.
I don't know if there's anything I would say.
Yeah.
If they would be willing to have a sit down at any point, I'd be completely open to that. As you said, history proves that I'm not a vicious animal killer in any way, shape, or form.
Right.
History proves that I love animals. I've saved animals.
Right.
And I've always known that, which has helped me get through it as well. The only thing, of course, I'm extremely apologetic for this terrible accident. And the secondary message is that with this whole cyberbullying thing in the world we live in, I mean, there are kids. If I didn't have the right support system, things could have gone south for someone like me in this type of situation, where you have thousands of people harassing you and mocking you over something that even people who are actually guilty is one thing, but someone who is not guilty is that whole other ballpark of just being in a really tough spot.
Well, and your support network was really powerful. I mean, we sit in court and we see young, people, whether they're juveniles, even juveniles, meaning under 18, and then young people and older people with no support in the courtroom. They're looking at serious criminal charges and they have no one there for them. You had your parents, your extended family and friends were really, were very, and as I said earlier, these reference letters on your behalf. I mean, you had dozens and dozens of people that were there to support you through this. And just think how different it would have been if you hadn't had that and you were left out on your own to try to, handle this really difficult situation. Would have been very different.
And it brings up a very interesting issue, which is how now in any kind of incident which is chargeable, becomes a criminal case, the world learns about it, the world speaks about it in social media. Everybody's got an opinion, and there's all this noise out there. Didn't exist when I first started handling criminal cases. There was the newspaper article, if there was one. And there was no forum for people to speak their mind. People would come to court maybe as spectators to watch. There was no forum. And that forum now that exists out there really affects the case. And we'll talk about it with respect to other cases.
Yeah.
I mean, any high-profile case now, there are a million opinions out there that are expressed through social media, through blogs. Well, blogs existed first and then the social media. But it's
you were touching,
sad.
You touched earlier, tying this into Ben, you said, this is going to be out there forever. How are you going to deal with that? I hate to be the bearer of bad news because a few minutes ago I talked about how powerful an expungement is. The reality is, legally it will be off your record, but when someone searches the World Wide Web, they will find it and you will have to answer to it. I have found, being 34 years now in criminal defense, I tell my clients, just like you're doing, communicate about it, put it out there, address it, face it, don't lie about it, don't hide from it. It's a part of your life story, and you can hold your head up and your chin high because you did not do anything intentionally wrong here. It was an accident. Yes, as you've owned up to, you were being stupid, and maybe wanting to kicking the ball and then stepping on it.
If I got prosecuted for the stuff I did in college,
right?
Or anybody for that matter.
Yeah.
I went to visit my brother at BU and they were playing hockey in the hallway.
Right.
I mean, come on.
I know. Yeah.
That would be grounds, according to you, have to kick them out of school permanently.
So,
I mean,
boy,
the world has gotten crazy.
Yes, it has. Really tough to be a young kid these days.
Yeah,
Marc.
really. I'm happy I'm old.
Right. Watch out for your grandkids. But I want Ben to have the last word and kind of anything you want to say. This is your stage. I know you've been waiting for a while to be able to speak freely. So anything else on your mind that you want to share?
Well, I feel like I did convey most of the messages that I needed to convey. I spoke about my platform, Ben Chase Motivation, where we talk about social media. And a big part of my reasoning as well is now there's one more account out there which is focused on positivity, not negativity, or not scolding people. And the final message, which I want to make part of my purpose as well, is there's always going to be media, but don't be the kid who cyberbullies someone based off of a random article that you read online. Yeah. Because you don't know what's true. As you said, it's all about clicks, or as we say, it's all about clicks, and people want to make money. So that article that was written about me was inaccurate. It was a misrepresentation. So the next time you see something like that, don't immediately harass that person or cyberbully them, because if that person doesn't have the support that I had, things could be really bad. I mean, there's a lot of young people who tragically, commit suicide over cyberbullying. And
Right.
It's very, very sad.
Well, it's great to meet you and hear your story, but more importantly, see how you've turned this thing, as you said, into a positive outlook on life. Unfortunately, many of our clients are permanently scarred and aren't in that situation. Some do. And it's a great lesson for all that, life is a bunch of setbacks, and failure is defined as the inability to deal with setbacks. It sounds like you're dealing with the setback and you move on. And hopefully, if you want to go to law school, good luck.
Thank you.
We wish you the best.
Yeah, just keep on doing what you're doing, because you're on a great path and not going to let anything hold you back from being successful in life. You've already succeeded in so many ways. And we're so honored that you were our first guest. Mm-hmm. We look forward to having some other great guests. It'll be hard to top this one, though, Marc.
Yeah, a very interesting case.
Yeah, it is.
It has a lot of twists and turns, and more importantly, aspects to it. And being that it's not, as I said at the beginning, a monumental case, it's not typically the kind of case you or I handle.
Yep.
But nevertheless, it's illustrative of the kind of things that you go through, even on the most simple and minor of crimes.
Right. And it also shows the power of a victim and the power of a prosecutor to get momentum behind a case.
And I think it's even more the power of the noise in the media, the noise in social media that creates an atmosphere that it's very hard to deal with.
That's right. And that's a new phenomenon in this world,
it is a new phenomenon.
in the court system. So, great show. And until next time, you're free to go. Down Low Investigations is a sponsor of You're Free to Go. Behind every great criminal defense attorney is a great private investigator. That's why Marc and I use Down Low to investigate cases all over the country. Down Low can help you too, whether you're running a background check on an employee or running a background check on a blind date, or let's say you need someone followed or some other type of investigative work conducted. Down Low is the way to go. Call Download Investigations at 561-843-1806. Everything expressed and discussed in this episode are the opinions and experiences of attorneys Guy Fromston and Marc Nurek and their guests. All ethical rules are complied with. Attorney-client privilege and confidential information is not shared or released during these episodes, and names, dates, locations, and other identifying information may be changed to protect confidentiality. Topics are embellished, and none of the statements made constitute legal advice and should not be considered or relied on as such.